three things, okay? So the first thing which we'll learn is namespace. What is a namespace? Okay. Second thing is what is RBAC? And the third thing is role and role binding. Okay. Now, all these things which we'll be learning today is related to my authorization. Now, when you start logging in for the first time, okay, now it is your own environment, you have your own account. So when you log in right now, you get admin access. It means you will have all the power and you can do everything. Like you can create a cluster, you can add nodes, you can delete cluster, you can run any container which you want. So you get complete control on the cluster. But when you work on a production environment, definitely this is not going to happen. There you will get role-based access. Means suppose you are joining the team as a developer, so you will get development related access. Suppose you are joining the team as a support engineer or an admin guy, you will get admin related access. Suppose you join as a support engineer, you will get monitoring access. So based on your role, you will get access, which simply means that you will not be able to access everything. So whenever we talk about security, okay, now security is a very important aspect. Any customer, if you talk about, the first question they will ask is, how secure is the environment? If I take my things to Kubernetes, let me say all these days I was using Docker. Now you take it to Kubernetes, how secure the Kubernetes environment is? Or the question will be, how can I make my Kubernetes cluster secure? So let me say I'm facing an interview. The question which will be asked to me is, how can I make my cluster secure? First thing. So you can say that, okay, fine. See, if I'm using a cloud environment, I can create IAM users, and for that IAM user, I'll give only limited permission. So that is one. Then second, at a cluster level or at a Kubernetes level, how do you make sure that you take care of the security aspect? So the first and the foremost is minimum access, okay, which means that you give the access only for what it is needed. Okay, so there is a minimum access policy, So the simple meaning is, if the developer needs development related access, give only development related access. Don't give any additional access. Okay, first is this. Second is follow RBAC principles. RBAC principle is role-based access. Then use SSL TLS certificates. And use authentic images only. Use private or authentic images only. Okay. So this can be easily done. There's no big deal here. Okay. Suppose my company is running application. So I will put everything in the private hub. I will not keep it in the public hub. Like anybody can come and take, like that thing I will not do. I'll put everything in my private hub. So that's easy. Authentic images means if you are taking it from GitHub, Docker Hub or anywhere, you make sure that you're only taking the official images. Don't just randomly pick any image. Then there is something called SSL TLS certificate. Now, what is this? Suppose if I log into a website, let me say I will log into my Gmail account, okay? Or let me log into Gmail only, okay? So if you see here, there is a SSL TLS certificate. Now, why this SSL TLS certificate is important? Because if you see here, it says the connection is secure. So how is this connection becoming secure? Because there is a valid certificate. Now, why is this valid certificate needed? And why should you always look for this? Now, let me say that I'm using a website like Amazon.com. So if I'm using a website like Amazon.com, okay, I will have to do payment. Okay. So when I am doing a payment from Amazon.com, my card details are going to some other website. Let me say I'm doing a Visa payment. So from this, my Amazon.com, my credit card details, my debit card details are going to Visa. And that is happening over internet. And there are high chances that when the data is moving over the internet, they can be stolen, or they can be misplaced, or they can be hacked. So this channel should be very much secure. Okay. It is not possible always that you use intranet. Intranet is like within the company network. So there is very less possibility that this will always happen. It is good that if it happens, but still there is no guarantee that this will always happen. So second is to make sure that the data transfer is happening securely, use SSL TLS certificates. Then the next is use RBAC rules. So as I told you, RBAC is nothing but role-based access control. So if there is a developer, give him development related access only. Okay, if there is a tester, then give him testing related access only. Then minimum access policy. Don't give admin rights randomly to anyone. Don't just share your username, password, and all these things. So if you take care of these things, bare minimum, okay, if you take care of all these things, then continuous monitoring and alert. Okay, so if you take care of these small things, there are high chances that 90 to 95% of the problems which may occur, you might have handled it, or you might have taken care of that. Okay, so always make sure that you are using these things. Now, continuous monitoring, which we'll be learning next. Continuous monitoring is like a regular body health checkup. Okay, so if you go to a doctor or anyone, they will say that, okay, in every 6 months, at least you should go for a body health checkup. Then what happens is we as an individual, we simply ignore it. But suppose there is a problem and we go for a body health checkup, then there are high chances that it will be detected and it can be fixed at the very early stage. If it is fixed at the early stage, the damage is less and the time taken to resolve the issue is also less. Okay, so if I have a disease, suppose I detected it early, I can fix it early with low cost, low time. But if the disease becomes big and I have not detected it, that means it will take good amount of time, good amount of money, and the damage will also be more. So basically, we follow these principles to make sure that our application is secure on Kubernetes environment. Now, minimum access policy, we know that we are not going to give all the access in the world. Now, today, what we will do is we will be learning about RBAC. Okay, now when we talk about RBAC, let's see how to implement RBAC. So what I have done is, this is my GitHub repo. So here I have something called RBAC. Okay, so RBAC is what I will try to implement. Okay, if you just come to internet and say RBAC. This is how RBAC looks like. Suppose I'm going to create a pod reader role, means there will be a pod. Okay, then in that pod, there will be a there will be a role, pod reader role, and then it will be done. There will be a role binding, means role is nothing but it's a power. Okay, and then it will be binded to a particular user or a group or an account. Based on that, he will get access. Okay, and then he will get, so it's a reader access. So he will get only read access, something like that we will be trying to do. Okay, so there is pod reader and pod reader role binding. Now, one more important thing which we will be talking about is namespace. Namespace. Now, let me say I have I have a Kubernetes account. So let me say this is my Kubernetes account. Then there are 3 projects which are running in parallel: project A, project B, and project C. Now, there are high chances that I have created a YAML file. Let me say I have created a YAML file with the name as sample.yaml. Okay. And here also somebody has created sample.yaml. Now what will happen is there are chances that a team member who is sitting in project B may overwrite my changes, or a team member sitting in C will override B changes. So there are high chances that one team member of a different team will overwrite your changes. Okay. So what we do is we create namespace. Now, what is a namespace? So namespace is a separate logical distribution. It's a logical distribution. It's not a physical distribution. Okay. In the same cluster, I'm creating small logical groups. These small logical groups, I tell them as namespace. How can you see that? So let me just bring my Kubernetes environment up. Let me come here. Let me bring up my Kubernetes environment. Okay. Now let me just come here and say minikube start. So I'm starting my Kubernetes environment. Okay, let me clear all these things. And I will start like this, kubectl get all. Okay, so I can see nothing is here, only one cluster IP is there. Suppose I create a deployment file. Okay, so deployment GATS. Okay, I will say something like this, nano deployment dot YAML, YAML. Give me 1 second. Okay, so okay, Satya, can you switch off your video? Anyhow, so let me just go ahead and create this YAML file. So let me paste the content whichever I have copied from here. Mohammed, you can post your question, man. I will take the question from there. Meanwhile, let me just take out all these unnecessary spaces from here. Okay, so this is my application, Control X, Y, enter. Now let me apply this, kubectl apply -f, and I will give the name as deployment.yaml. Now our deployment got created. If I go inside this deployment, copy, come here and say kubectl describe deployment, whatever you have. If you see carefully here, the namespace is default. So if you do not mention any particular namespace, the default namespace will be picked up. Okay. Now, let me go ahead and delete this guy first. Okay. kubectl delete -f. Okay. Now, if I want to see what all deployments, what all namespace are there, I will say kubectl get namespace. You can say ns or namespace. Either of them will work. So most of the time you will see the default namespace is getting used unless and until you specify this particular namespace will be used. If you want that your namespace should be used, you can go ahead and create one. You can say kubectl you can come here and say kubectl create namespace and let me say development. So I'm creating a namespace with the name as development. Now, if I want, I can go ahead and put these thing in my development namespace -n, and I will say development. So what will happen is this particular thing will be created, but it will be created in a different namespace. So copy this content, come here and say kubectl describe this guy. Sorry, kubectl describe. Wait a second. Okay, kubectl get all. If you simply say kubectl get all, you will not be able to see your deployment. Now, because you have created it in a different namespace, you will have to say something like this: development. Now, if you see your development, deployment, replica set, pod and all will be visible to you. Now, if you go inside this guy, copy kubectl describe this particular pod -n development, you will be able to see the content. And this is inside my development namespace. So this is my namespace. So can one component in one namespace talk to another component in another namespace? Yes, definitely that can be done. That kind of network setup can be done. But the motto here is that I want to isolate this guy from the other places. Okay. So I'm creating a different namespace altogether. What is the, okay, I'll come to that. Mohammed, hold on for some time. What is the relation between namespace and RBAC? I'll come to that. What are we doing this in interactive shell only? Why can't we do it in our server? So I told you that whatever I'm doing on interactive shell, you can do it on your server. If you keep your servers up and running, there is a cost involved. And if you want to pay that cost, you can very well go ahead and do everything. I have told you that the servers remain as it is. Okay, whether you run it on interactive shell, you run it on your AWS, you run on your EKS. Going forward, I'll teach you on GCP. So wherever you run, the commands don't change. Okay, it's the Kubernetes engine. The way you put those things into place, that only change. Apart from that, nothing changes. Okay, so kubectl delete. Wait a second. Clear all these things. Kubectl delete delete -f and then the name deployment and then -n development. Okay, so this will now be deleted. Now this is my namespace, which is nothing but a logical boundary between your, in your cluster only, you're creating a logical boundary. Now let's go with RBAC. So to work with RBAC, I told you I have created a documentation here and I will be following this documentation. So it says bring your minikube up and running, which is there. It says apt get update -y, means if there are any updates on the system to be done, go ahead and do it. So let me run this update command.
Sir, can you please explain the namespace by graphical way?
I just now showed you, no? I told you that if this is your cluster, I'm creating logical boundaries. I'm saying this is development, this is test, this is UAT, this is production. So each namespace is an isolated environment in your Kubernetes cluster. Okay. Now,
Yes, but the problem is when you show the cluster, you don't show the nodes. So I don't know, are you talking about a specific node or any node?
no, it is any node. See, when I say cluster, I told that suppose this is my master node, okay, and these are my worker nodes. Okay, altogether this is a cluster for me. Now I will not go and say worker 1 belongs to namespace 1, this is namespace 2, this is namespace 3. That is not my task. That is Kubernetes task. Okay, I will treat this entire thing as one cluster, and here these logical boundaries will be created, and Kubernetes as a tool will give me that segregation, that this is namespace A, this is namespace B, this is a different namespace. That thing will be done at Kubernetes level.
Okay, let's say you've got a 4 nodes cluster, and then you've got you want to create a 5 namespace.
Yes, definitely you can do that. You can create any number of
so it means, yeah, so it means one node will be divided, well, partitioned into.
That's what I told. You cannot go as per the node, like node 1 goes to namespace A. That kind of segregation doesn't happen. Cluster for me is one single unit. Okay, in that one single unit, based on what all resources you have, the namespace will be allocated. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So is the namespace tells the naming convention of the nodes, or
no? It is not. It has nothing to do with nodes. It has nothing to do with nodes. It has everything to do with the cluster.
okay, that means giving the identity.
I'm saying it is just a logical separation. Overall, if you see. 1 second.
Because so is it like a VPC in AWS?
Kind of virtually, yes. See, this is my cluster. It can have n number of worker nodes.
Multiple nodes. Yep.
Now, there is a possibility that in this namespace, there is only one worker node. Here, there are 2 worker nodes. But that internal thing is not my headache. Okay. This entire cluster I'm treating as one single machine, and the namespace is creating logical boundaries for me. That's it.
So cluster is specific to, namespace is, we can say it's specific to the cluster, not specific to the pods.
Yes, not specific to the pods, not specific to the node. It is only and only specific to the cluster.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Because so then in that case, we have only one cluster, no, sir?
Yes, I have only one cluster.
So for entire one cluster, the only one namespace will be created, right?
Why? I'm showing you here, right? See, kubectl get namespace. How many namespace I have? I have only one machine. I have these many namespaces.
So, but what we have created is for only one, and then automatically
there are default namespaces. This is default. This is default. This is default. This is default. I only created this guy.
That is for which one? For entire our cluster, right?
No, entire cluster.
Okay.
Sir, it's like a planned area, right? Because like it's suppose
it's kind of a reserved area, you can say.
Yes, yes.
If this is my entire cluster, okay, I'm reserving this amount of space, and I'm saying this is my development namespace.
Yes.
And all the development related things will go and sit here. That's it.
Okay.
Because in a single cluster, we can have production, UAT, development.
You can have
So we can
everything.
segregate by the namespace.
Yes, you can have. But in real-time world, I told you that we do not go with single machine cluster, because then failover and all cannot be taken care of. Because if you have only one machine and that machine crashes, who is going to back up that?
So each
So they will
segment
be setting up
work-wise
the failover clustering.
Huh?
We need to set up the failover clustering.
That's what I told. No, I told, right? When I talk about cluster, there is something called training cluster, which we generally use for training and all those things. One time we use and then our work is done, we let it go. Minikube is an example of that. When I create it on a cloud environment where I have 4 or 5 machines, there I go with a production grade cluster. So I told you all these things, right?
Yeah, but that is managed service in AWS or GCP,
That
or
is
do we
not
need to set up?
important. When I was teaching COPS, I told you, you can independently create your environment where you decide how many worker nodes you want, how many master nodes you want.
Okay.
And sir,
Yes,
right now
please.
what we have created is for only for development namespace,
Yes.
right?
But
Like that, if we want for deployment or something different, then we can do, right?
yes, you can do for everything.
With the
Sir,
same
if-
cluster.
Yes,
If
So
we
whichever
have,
is the related work we are doing, that will go into that particular area.
yes, yes. So
Now
if you remember, 1 second. See, this is what I did. kubectl apply -f, and I created this deployment YAML in the development namespace. Okay. Fine. Let me move
it is
ahead.
applied on all the pods in deployment, right? Inside the we are creating.
No, I am not getting your question. See, take it like this. Don't deviate. This is your cluster. In this cluster, I am creating a logical boundary. I'm saying this is my development namespace. Whatever you create will go and sit here. This is what I'm doing. So when I'm creating a deployment, along with that replica set, pod, all the things will be created. Everything will go and sit here.
My question is, if we creating by deployment by ML, 3 pods. So we are align namespace in deployment YML. So it is applying totally on deployment YML.
Yes, it is applying altogether. Everything is getting applied. Yes.
Everything, right?
Yes.
And if we applying namespace, so can we apply on single pods?
No.
And if we apply,
you can't do that. You can't do that. If you're running it at a deployment level, it will apply to everything. When you individually create a pod and you want to do it, yes, you can do it.
So different namespace can be ping, so it is not pingable.
I told network connectivity between one namespace and the other namespace can be established. But the entire concept of creating the namespace is that there should be an isolation. Like namespace A should not connect with namespace B. But if you want, it can be done. Guys, whenever I say something, you have to listen to that and understand that. If you keep asking the same question, we will not be able to proceed.
I have joined late. Can you please explain again namespace and RBAC?
RBAC will come. Hold on. I'll muting everyone. I'll just move ahead with the class, and towards the end, I will take the questions. Okay.
Yeah, because sorry for disturbance. This one.
1 second. Go ahead. Somebody was asking a question. Who was it? Yeah, somebody was asking a question. Please go ahead.
Because what is the difference between namespace and C group? Like we can able to differentiate in the
C group is at container level. Okay.
Yeah.
C group is at container level. We are not segregating things at container level. Rather, we are segregating at a namespace level. So you can, if you go by the difference, namespace is at Kubernetes level, C group and all are at container level.
Okay, so we can differentiate. Okay.
Those are two different concepts altogether. One is working at a container level, the other one is working at a Docker level.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, let me mute you in between. If you have any questions, please put it on the chat window. I will take it from there. So this is what I have done. The first thing what I was talking about is namespace. So I told namespace is nothing but it's a logical boundary. It's a logical boundary. It's not a physical boundary. In the cluster, I can have 5 worker nodes, 2 master nodes. Accordingly, the capacity will be divided. Okay. Each namespace is a separate unit. The communication, yes, can be done, but the entire purpose of creating these logical boundaries are that the communications should not happen, or there should be no interference between 2 namespace. But yes, if you want, you can very well go ahead and do it. So as of now, if you come here, you can see I have, these are the namespace which is by default available. Okay, kube public, kube system and all. I went ahead and I created a namespace with the word as development. Now, what is RBAC? Now, RBAC means there will be a role, okay? And based on that role, you will get the power, okay? So there are 2 things here. One is role, and the other one is role binding. Role binding. Okay. And this role is given, a role binding is done for a user. Okay, or for a service, or for an application. Now, try to understand this. Any doubts, please put it on the chat window. Now, role means the responsibilities or the power. And these are the guys who need that power. Okay. They cannot directly go and take that power. Okay, so they need something called role binding, which will attach the user and the power. Okay, so in between, there will be something called role binding. Now, if I bring all these things together, I can implement my RBAC. So suppose this is my cluster where I'll have master node and worker node. When you try to log in, the first place you reach is your API server. In your API server, there are 2 things which happens. Authentication and authorization. Authentication means whether you are a genuine user or not. So your user credentials are checked. So if I go and just simply try to log in with a credential called Sam or Peter or Vikas, first thing it will check whether Vikas is an authentic user or not. Then it will check what all access he has, whatever rights he has. So authentication by API server is done at 2 levels. 1, whether the user is a genuine user or not. Second, if he is a genuine user, what all privileges he has, whatever rights he has. Okay, so let me just implement all these things at the RBAC level. Now, for implementing RBAC, there is a standard documentation which comes from Kubernetes. We don't do much. There is no requirement for you to learn all the commands. Just you need to know that how it is being done. Okay, so let me come here. The first command says bring your minikube. It is there in my GitHub repo. You can directly take from there. The first command says that you have to do a apt-get update, means you have to update your application. So the application will get updated here. Generally, it happens that whatever version you are using may not be the latest version. So it will go ahead and run and give you the latest version. Some warnings are there, you can ignore. 90% of the content has been updated. So whatever Ubuntu machine you got, it has the latest content. I told when you want to log in, you will need a. So obviously, if you go to godaddy.com or anything like that, you can buy a SSL certificate. But for practice purpose, I have something called OpenSSL, which is free of cost. and I can easily use it. So I will say apt get install OpenSSL. It's a free software which you can easily get from the internet. Okay, so apt get install OpenSSL. So a certificate will be generated for me. So I will get this OpenSSL certificate in some time. Let's wait. Okay, so next is to create a development namespace, which I've already done. So I'm waiting for this to finish. Generally does not take this much time, but 1 upgraded, 0 newly added, 0 to remove, 250 not upgraded. Should not take this much time. Got stuck somewhere. Let me just wait. Bring up a new machine. I think it got stuck. Done. So now it is done. I was trying to open another machine, but before that, it is done. So here, this OpenSSL has been installed here. So I have got a SSL certificate. So two things I have done. I have updated my application. I have installed OpenSSL certificate. Third thing is kubectl get namespace. So if you see here, I can see this development namespace has been created, and I'm going to put everything in this development namespace. So now using this SSL certificate, which I OpenSSL, I'm going to create a certificate or a CSR. Okay. And also I'll create a user and I will create RSA token for him. So whenever you do a SSH or you have to connect, you will need the keys, private and public key. Okay, these are all Unix concepts. So you need a certificate and you need the key. Then using this certificate and the key, the user, dev user will be created, and he will log in to the network dev user or common name of the user, like how I will call that user. So I have given the name as dev user and he will log into my development namespace. So here I'm saying create a private key and a certificate for signing for dev user. Okay. So two things, private key and certificate. This certificate is coming from SSL. And when I'll create this user, I will get a private key. So these are some standard commands. Even I don't exactly know what they will do. Okay. If you're hard into Unix, you might be aware of this, but I don't exactly know about it. I don't have necessity also to know about it. These are some commands which I just need to run as per the documentation of Kubernetes. Okay, I had never tried to go and dig deep into all these things. So even I don't know how it works. So using OpenSSL, I'm generating a key. Key is my key which will be used to connect to the servers. So a private key has been generated. Okay. Then the next command is again using OpenSSL. Nobody will ask you these commands. These are some commands which you have to rather take it from documentation, one-time activity. Just need to know the process. Paste. So I'm saying sudo using OpenSSL. I request for a new key, dev user key, which I have generated here, and assign a certificate to this user, dev user certificate. Going forward, my username will be dev user and I will be using him in the development namespace. Okay, some error, but that's okay. You can ignore this. Okay, some .rnd file is there where you are not able to upload it, but you can ignore that. No need to worry about that. So because you are using an interactive shell, you may not have the entire access. Okay, then you associate this key, whichever got generated, the user and this thing, sudo OpenSSL dev user certificate, associate it with the Minikube. Okay. And the key also you associate it with the Minikube, and this user will be valid for 45 days. Okay. So signature is okay. Subject is CN or the common name. The name is dev user, and he has access to the development namespace, and the CA or the common, the certificate is a private key. So basically I have done two things here. I have created a open SSL certificate. Using that certificate, I have generated a key. Using that key, I have again generated a certificate and assigned it to my user, and the user will be using my development namespace. Okay, that's it. Now, as of now, if you come here and you come to this, so this is config view or the view of this Minikube. Now, if you see the Minikube, there are many things here, but I'm interested here. Users, as of now, there is only one user, the Minikube user. Okay. I'm not interested in this Minikube user. This Minikube user has a certificate. He has a key. But I am not interested in this particular user, Minikube certificate key. No, I'm not interested in this user. I'm interested in creating my own user, which is dev user, and then allocate him the required permission. So let me come here and paste this guy. So it says kubectl config set credentials. There is a new user coming in with the name as dev user. He has a certificate and he has the key. And it says user dev user has been set. Now, if you come back here and come and say kubectl config view, now you will see another user with the name as dev user. He has a certificate and he has a key has been associated to my Minikube. Okay. Now, if I don't want to associate it with Minikube, rather I want to associate it with my pod, the document, there will be a documentation which I'll share with you, and that using that documentation, you can attach it to your cluster. Okay. So these are the standard commands which directly come from Kubernetes. I don't think much can be done here or much can be explained here. There is nothing to explain. This is a standard set of commands which directly come from Kubernetes. Now, if I go to this guy, so I have this dev user. Now, this dev user, I'm saying set context for this user, and the name should be dev user context. Means he will be using Minikube, he will be using development environment, and his name is dev user. I will not be using all these three things one time again and again. I will simply say dev user context. Means whenever I say dev user context, you should know that I'm going to use Minikube cluster. I'm going to use development environment, development namespace, and I'm going to create a user with the name as dev user. Okay. Have we created a user? Yes, definitely we have created a user. This is the place where we created a user. This is the place where we created a user. Okay, or the key, and then we told we will call it, we call the user by the name as dev user. Okay, these are some hardcore Unix commands. I am not a Unix admin, so I cannot like 100% tell you, okay, this is this. But what I know here is that now if I come here and say kubectl config view, I have my, earlier I had only one user, which was Minikube. Now I have my own user, dev user, and this guy has a certificate and has a key. And using this, he will be able to log in. So now as of, I have done the first round of validation. Means I have a user with the name as dev user. This guy is a valid user because he has a valid certificate and he has a valid credential, okay, or certificate and key. So he has certificate and key. API server, first round of validation will be done. But how about the second round of validation? Second round of validation says what all he will be able to access. So as of now, I have not allocated him any power. So he will not be able to access anything. Okay. So let's allocate him the power. To allocate the power, we told that there will be a role, and this role there will be binded to this role will be binded to a user using role binding. So first is you go ahead and create a wait. Okay. So now let me go ahead and see what all access he has. He will have nothing, but let me just check once. Paste. So I'm trying to run a command. I'm saying kubectl get pods. Okay, and I'm using a context as dev user context. Sometime back when I ran this command, I told if I use dev user context, you say that I'm running it on a minikube, the namespace is development and the user is dev user. So by default, you take all these things. So I will run this command now. kubectl get pods and the context is dev user context. Now here, if you see, it says error from the server, pod is forbidden, dev user cannot list the resources. First thing which I came to know is that the user does not have access to list the resources. But the second thing is dev user exists in the system. He is not a random user or any XYZ user. So there are two things. Second level of authentication has failed. So to work with that second level of authentication, I have something called podreader.yaml. So let me put that file here. What is the content of this file? So the content is here. Podreader.yaml. Let me copy this content. And try to understand what is this. Again, same thing. It's an API version. Okay, RBAC authorization, this thing. The kind is role. So we are creating a role. In the metadata, I have given the namespace, which is development, and I have given the name, and I'm saying it is pod reader. Rules means what all power you have given here. So the power is you can check the pod and the pod logs. So these two things can be done here. But what you can get, watch, list, update. If you see carefully, I have not given create access. Okay, so if the user who has having this power is trying to create a pod or want to create a pod log, he will not be able to. Yes, if he is trying to get, watch, or list anything, he will be able to see it. Control X, Y, enter. How to apply this? kubectl apply -f pod reader role.yaml. So it will say, sorry, I should have -n development does not mean, I think development must namespace development. What happened? Just let me just come here 1 second. One second. ls -l pod reader role.yaml. It's okay, right? kubectl apply -f. So, error when creating namespace development not found. Why? kubectl create namespace. I think I missed the spelling somewhere. Copy, paste. kubectl create namespace development. Okay, so kubectl get ns. Okay, spelling was wrong. Okay, So the actual spelling is development, L-O-P-M-E-N-T. So this spelling was wrong. So if you want, you can delete it. kubectl, delete DE, delete NS namespace. And this one I'm deleting, okay? Copy. Paste. Okay. Namespace deleted, clear. So now the namespace is correct, okay? Now let me come here and say kubectl get namespace. So the spelling should be DEVELOPMENT. So now if I try to run this command, create namespace, sorry, this command. Okay. So I'm trying to create a role, pod reader role. Run this. So it says pod reader has been created. So role has been created. Now this role has to be assigned to my user, dev user. For that, I need to create a role binding. So let me come here and just run this. So you will be able to see your role basically. Paste this. So I can see a pod reader role has been created. So I can see my role, but in this namespace. Similarly, I will create a role binding. So you can run a role binding here. Paste this guy. And here, take the file from here. So go back, role binding. This is pod reader role binding. Take this, come back to your document, sorry, this thing. Paste it here. So if you see here, this is role binding. The name is pod reader. It is going in my development namespace, and the subject is user. The user name is dev user, and you are associating it to the role. The role name is pod reader. Okay. So role binding simply means bind it or attach it to the role whom dev user should get this pod reader role. Okay. How to work with this? kubectl apply -f pod reader role. What did I create? One second. Role binding. So role binding also has been created. Now let me go here. Now, if I run this command, now kubectl get pods and the context is dev user context. So at least now I'm not getting that error, the old error. The old error was access denied. If I want to create a pod, okay, if I want to create a pod, so let me say I want to create a pod, okay, something like this I'm trying to do. Let me take a sample pod file, nano pods.yaml. Okay, let me take a sample pod file from somewhere. Pod in Kubernetes. This is a pod file I'm trying to create, but remember, I don't have create access. Okay, so let's see here. Paste this guy. So this is my pod, and I'm trying to create it. Okay, how to create it? So kubectl apply -f pods.yaml and in the namespace development. So this is the namespace. Okay, how come I'm able to create this? One second. Okay, I'm able to see that's okay. Okay, one second. So I have logged in as an admin user. Just give me 1 second. If I try to do the same thing, give me 1 second. I have some small thing here to be discussed. kubectl delete minus F. And this is my pods.yaml. Copy. Okay. This pod is what I'm trying to delete. And ideally with my user, the user was this guy, dev user, he should not be able to create and delete all these things. But this is the normal user. Okay, just give me 1 second. I'll just come to that user also. Let me show you that. Let the pod first get deleted and then I'll come to that. Take the questions after that. Give me some time for this. I hope this works will be done by admin and not the DevOps engineer. Yes, all these works which I am showing you is to be done by the not the DevOps guy. The admin will do all these things. RBAC and namespace will be done by admin only. Okay, let's clear this. So I am trying to do something like this. Okay. So kubectl get pod minus context dev user. So no user is there. Okay. Then I will try to create one pod here. Something like this. So you are trying to run. So you are saying kubectl run nginx image and the context is dev user. So your dev user is trying to run, but he will get error because he doesn't have access. But if the normal user is trying, so I'll remove all these things. Okay. See, now if you run without the context, it means your admin user is running. So admin user is able to do it. But if I run it like this, I get an error. Means my dev user is not able to create a pod. Is he in a position to view the stuff? 1 second. I made a small mistake again. Minus N. DEVELOPMENT. I should have created in development region. Now, if I want to see it, yes, my user is able to see it. Why is it happening? Because in the role I have told pod reader role binding. Pod reader role. Here I have told he will have get access, watch access, list access, update access, but he will not have create access. Okay. So I'll repeat everything what I have done from the very beginning, and then I will take your questions. Okay. First thing first. Sir, did not understand, please go with GUI. Okay, I'll come to that and I'll explain everything one by one. Let's. Okay. So we start with RBAC. Okay. So RBAC is saying that give me limited access to limited resources. Don't give me admin access. First thing, what I do is I create a namespace. So namespace gives me a logical boundary. And within that boundary, that user will have access. Outside that boundary, he will not have access. But to have that access or to work with that thing, he needs a role. And then a role binding has to be there. Role binding. And then the user. Okay. So whenever you create the role, it is nothing but the power. And this power has to be associated with this user. But directly, this cannot be associated. So you create a role binding, then you first create a role, then role binding, and then associate the power with the user with the help of role binding. So two concepts. One is namespace, logical boundary, role binding, and user for linking all of them together. And the third is when you create a user, you need the credentials. So credentials are nothing but his key and his certificate. And you get both from OpenSSL. Okay, so what all things I have done? Let me just take this out, this entire thing. Come here one by one. So we started here. We told we will be talking about namespace, RBAC, role, and role binding. Okay, so we need to give minimum access. Okay, now we updated the application. We installed OpenSSL. We created a separate namespace with the name as development. We allocated a key and a certificate to the user. The user name I gave as dev user, and I gave him this namespace. Okay. Once this was done, I associated this particular user to my Minikube cluster. And with the Minikube cluster, I was able to see that he has access to the Minikube cluster. Then I took this dev user and I created a role. Then I created a role binding. So I created a role here. Then I created a role binding. Finally, I associated both of them. And here I'm able to take this thing to my user. Okay. If we get access till he is not able to create pod. No, if you give him access, definitely he will be able to create the pods and do whatever he want to. So in that case, if you want to give him access to create pods, you can come here and edit this guy. You can take this guy, nano, pod reader role.yaml. Sorry. Here you give him create access. Okay. Now I'll not take questions now. Okay. I'm running late. I'll not take questions now, but tomorrow before starting the class, I will take all the questions. Okay. And I will share these things. I request you to practice and then I will proceed further tomorrow. Okay. I'm running late. That's why I cannot take questions now. I'll take it tomorrow. I'll not skip without taking questions. Okay. Fine. See you then, guys.